You're listening to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ 750 AM. During the next hour, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Welcome to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ 750 AM. Father Greg Sakowicz, the rector of Holy Name Cathedral, and co-hosting, always backed by popular demand, Mark Teresi, assistant to the rector for plan and development, which happened to be assistant with me. And Mark, how are you this morning?
Very good. I'm back by popular demand because my wife called you and asked you to have me on again.
Please take him. Get him out of the house. And also, we are, second time ever, live streaming, and our phone number 312-255-8408, and Mark and I are socially distancing with masks on. You take this COVID-19 very, very seriously.
Now, I noticed you have your Bears mask on in anticipation of a win tonight against Tom Brady.
I've been going back and forth, yes or no, and I think the Bears may sneak one out in a close game, but boy, Tom Brady and Tampa Bay playing good football, and it's home tonight in Chicago, but again, there's no fans, so it's really not home crowd, but you have your own stadium. But beautiful weather this week, Mark, has been terrific.
Yesterday was glorious. What a glorious.
And they're talking tomorrow to be close to 80. Mm-hmm. Even the weekend, not bad for the next couple of days. So we have a great program lined up here on Catholic Chicago again. We are live streaming, and many people are now live streaming us. So keep viewing. We have a great lineup today of a tremendous program. Mike Hoffman, who's chairman of the Hope and Healing Committee, a clergy abuse survivor and author of Acts of Recovery, and Tom Tharayil. Tom is the director of the Office of Assistance Ministry in the Office for the Protection of Children and Youth, and the 9th annual Mass for Hope and Healing is scheduled to premiere on Saturday, October 24th at 10 a.m. The first Mass was held as part of the dedication of the Healing Garden, which was created as a permanent reminder of clergy sexual abuse and as a safe space for victims, survivors, and their families to gather. The Mass has been hosted by the Office of Assistance of Ministry. It was created in 1992. So, Mike and Tom, welcome to the program this morning. How are you, gentlemen? Are you with us?
How are you?
There you are.
Hello, Mike. How are you, Tom? How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Oh, my gosh. In fact, Mike, I go back with your family, Kathy and the children. I got to St. Mary of the Woods in 1992, and you arrived in what year with the family?
I think, God, it always dates me, Father Greg, but I think it was 2002 we arrived at St. Mary of the Woods.
And you and Kathy and the children so involved in the faith community for all those years. And, of course, I left in 2010. And, of course, you still remain active at St. Mary of the Woods. So now, I think we want to have a little bit of well, first of all, if we back up here a little bit, maybe Tom for a moment. The office that you're part of was founded in what year?
I believe it was in 1992. It was established by Cardinal Bernardine at the time to respond to victim survivors of clergy sexual abuse, to provide healing and reconciliation was part of their mission.
And you have been with the office for how many years?
Actually, my anniversary ties in with the Mass, so 9 years.
So for 9 years. And also then, Mike, you wrote a tremendous book called The Acts of Recovery by ACTA Publication. And so maybe just for a moment, you are a sexual abuse survivor. And briefly, you've been on the program many times, and you're very transparent, you're very honest, and your goal is to help those who've been sexually abused to come forward. Maybe just briefly for a moment, tell us what happened in terms of how you came forward.
Well, sure, of course. So I am a childhood sexual abuse survivor by a clergy who was, the priest at the time was a dear friend to my parents. And so my coping mechanism at that time was to keep it all inside. So fast forward 30 years later, it's my sincere attempt to live a healthy life, and I would ask all abuse survivors to try to live a healthy life. And so in doing so, I felt the need to share my story with my wife, Kathy. And I've shared this with you, Father Greg. I thought originally my wife might think differently of me as her husband or as a provider to our children. And obviously she didn't think differently of me. And so she heard that story with love and compassion and support. And so soon after that experience of telling my wife my story, I frankly turned to you, Father Greg, because I was and remain active at St. Mary of the Woods, and I felt that I probably couldn't kind of participate in the life of the liturgy and in the life of the parish if I was keeping this secret inside. And so trusting you and knowing you, I reached out to you, Father Greg, and I told you my story of childhood sexual abuse. And from there, you encouraged me, and I then began to feel comfortable to come forward to tell my story to the Archdiocese of Chicago. And that's when, I had met Tom Tharayil and Leah McCluskey and Myra Flores, and I was met. They received my story with such decency and professionalism and compassion, and because of that and all of that went so well, we're able to talk about it here today.
Now, Mike, let me just ask you: your sexual abuse by the priest predator, did it last about 4 years between like the age of 9 and 13, roughly?
That's correct.
And the thing is, I remember you said to me, because you've shared the story before, and I'm very humbled, that when you came to me, you had this deep fear that I would reject you, call you a liar, it never happened, defend the priesthood, and tell you to get out of here. I mean, in so many words.
Well, yes. I mean, if you can imagine, there's some anxiety in coming forward to tell such a perverse and depraved story, and I was thinking, maybe you might not be able to hear it and process it, and perhaps you might think that I was attacking you or your good ministry or your good character, and of course I would never do that, but that was some of the anxiety that I felt when I was coming forward and telling my story to you.
Now, Mike, then you moved that story, because I was there at St. Mary of the Woods. You shared your story with the whole parish. And I'm curious, as you did that, it took a lot of courage. It was probably the next step in terms of your healing. But what was the reaction? I mean, people knew you as involved in the parish. All of a sudden, you're up there telling this story. What were parishioner reactions, your friends' reactions to that?
There are wide reactions. I can summarize that in saying it was my effort to tell the parish my story was my effort to remain comfortable and have my heart be opened in the parish community. And I was received by the parish with nothing but love and compassion. So many people said, I'm so glad to hear you share your story. So sorry that it happened. But now that we know that it happened and we know that the Archdiocese reaches out to other victim survivors and that I have personally received many services from the Archdiocese and my family has received many services, that the regular Catholics in the pew were comforted to know that outreach services are there and long-standing with the support of all the priests and the leadership of the Archdiocese to heal these wounds caused by clergy abuse of children.
Now, Tom, Mike, you're a parent. Tom, you work every day in this area. How, it's such a devious, deadly sin. What should parents be looking for if their kids come to them with messages that somebody, is abusing them? Maybe they won't say it outright, but what should parents be aware of?
Well, I think some of the things are, is your child acting differently? First of all, if your child tells you something, if you have a child who does directly tell you something, to take it seriously and to act on it and to follow up on that. But often you'll see signs like either their grades may be slipping a little bit, their behaviors may be a little bit different. You'll start to get clues that suggest something is off, and then you can take some steps to check that out. And, to the credit of the Safe Environment Office, they're trying to do and have done a lot to try to prevent some of this from happening. What you heard from Mike is a fairly common story, especially for men, that it's not uncommon for them. I think the data is that they wait about 25 years or so before they're ready to come forward. And they also, like Mike talked about, feel the shame and the embarrassment and the confusion and the fear of what's going to happen if I come forward and talk about this. Will I be supported? So it's a big deal what Mike is doing today.
I do want to say that the office you work with, Tom, you and your colleagues, I have the highest compliments. You do such tremendous work with compassion, empathy, you listen. And Mike will be the first one to agree with me, because when Mike shared his story with me, I think it was back in 2006, Mike?
Yes, that's correct.
And the thing is, I said, you need to go to the Office of Protection of God's Children, it was called then, and you did, but you were hesitant because you were afraid, are they going to slam you, reject you, say it never happened, grill you, but you were met with such compassion. Now, one question, I know you've been asked many, many times, you kept this secret for 25 or 30 years before you finally came forward to Kathy and then to me. What triggered, after all those years, to finally say, I can't keep this inside anymore?
Well, sure. I had read in the summer of 2006, there was a story in the Chicago Tribune about another abuse survivor who was, frankly, suing the Archdiocese of Chicago, and I knew the boy. He was a friend of mine at the time, and it was, frankly, the lawsuit was related to the same abuser. And so seeing the abuser's name and seeing the location of abuse and reading the name of a guy I knew at the time triggered all of those memories that I had, frankly, normalized. I thought the ongoing anxiety I was feeling every day was normal, but then I realized, the full loss of the innocence of my youth and how, in fact, traumatic that relationship with that particular priest was to me and my family, and how disruptive it was. So with all of that flooding over me as a trigger, I wrestled with that for a couple of days, and then I finally decided, almost in a near panic, I decided to trust my wife, and I told her my most difficult story. And thank God, truly thank God I did that. For me, healing begins at home. And, it's that's my story.
Mm-hmm. We're going to take a little break. Tom and Mike, we'll be back in just a few minutes, 7:50 a.m., Catholic Chicago, 312-255-8408. When we come back, I really would like to discuss with you and Father Greg, how has the church's position changed from 25 years ago to now in terms of how the church looks at these issues, starting at the top with Pope Francis. We will be back in a few minutes. Please stay tuned.
You're invited to Keep Hope Alive 2020, the online benefit and celebration of the Archdiocese of Chicago's Immigration Ministry and their nationwide program, Pastoral Migratoria. Join us virtually on the evening of Thursday, October 29th, for a night filled with music, camaraderie, and inspiring speakers. Cardinal Blaise Supich and Sister Norma Pimentel of Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley, who was recently recognized as one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people, will be joining us to help keep hope alive. Now, more than ever, the immigrant community, both here in the Archdiocese of Chicago and across the United States, needs the leadership formation and accompaniment that Pastoral Migratoria provides. Registration is free, and sponsorship and advertising opportunities are available. Visit www.keephopealive2020.org for more information and to register. Again, that's www.keephopealive2020.org.
When you think of the word neighbor, warm and friendly thoughts come to mind. Think of smiles across the yard, positive wishes, and looking out for one another on an ongoing basis. Catholic Charities' Neighbors in Need Fund inspires all of these and much more. We've seen an unprecedented number of requests for assistance this year from people who have never needed help before. When you make your gift to the Neighbors in Need Fund, you are igniting hope in the lives of your most vulnerable neighbors, especially individuals and families who continue to struggle to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. Your gift will give them the resources they need to overcome the unexpected, very serious circumstances in which they find themselves now. Give online at CatholicCharities.net or call 312-948-6087. That's 312-948-6087. Catholic Charities Neighbors in Need Fund. Thank you for helping build a world of kindness, one neighbor to another.
Have you checked out Chicago Catholic lately? Either in print or online, Chicago Catholic has informative and stimulating content, including news from the Archdiocese, beautiful photographs, and a thoughtful column by our publisher, Cardinal Blaise Supich. Editor Joyce DeRiga tells us about our current edition of Chicago Catholic.
We have an overview of Pope Francis's new encyclical on fraternity and social friendship. Cardinal Supich's column is also dedicated to it. The Archdiocese is urging everyone to get a flu shot this year. We share the details of the campaign, and we have coverage of the recent ordination of permanent deacons.
Subscribe now. Go to chicagocatholic.com or call 312-534-7777. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Chicago Catholic, a fresh approach to Catholic news.
We're back, WNDZ, 750 AM on your dial. Father Greg Sakowitz here, Mark Teresi. We're safe distancing, we're masked, and we're sharing some very important stories and information with Mike and Tom regarding an annual Mass for Hope and Healing. But before we talk about our annual Mass for Hope and Healing, I had a question. A few months ago in our studio, we had a gentleman from Chile who was abused and was able, in some miraculous way, to have direct contact with the Pope. The Pope called him in. We also had the priest who is the Pope's person representative in terms of this issue of abuse. And it sounded like Pope Francis is taking this extremely to heart, and the Church's stance is becoming even stronger as an advocate for abuse victims. Can either of you comment on that from 25 years ago, 30 years ago to now? Where is the Church in terms of this issue?
Yeah, I can take a crack at it. I mean, I can say 25, 30 years ago, I think there was a lot of confusion about, well, do you believe the story? Who do you, who's telling the truth? Is the Church telling the truth? Are the opponents of the Church telling the truth? That kind of thing. I think what's evolved over time is, one, there's a general belief that, yes, this did occur, that children were being abused by priests. And I think what's shifted is a growing awareness of what the Church is doing. For example, if a victim survivor comes forward, we immediately offer them outreach. We immediately offer them support. And, one of the things that probably isn't talked about much is, there is an independent review board, for example, and on that board is a victim survivor to speak to the concerns of what would a victim survivor think. And another thing that probably isn't talked about much is very often as part of this process, when a victim survivor comes forward, after they've shared the story, after they've gone through therapy, after they've done some of this work, one thing that they often want is to somehow be able to tell their story to the cardinal. And the cardinal's been available for that. And I've had the chance to witness that and be there for those moments. And it's a very healing moment for someone to say, I need you to own some of this story with me. And the cardinal's been very responsive. And I think that it's a healing moment that doesn't really get talked about much.
Now, before I forget this, Tom, if somebody wanted to right now, a listener who would like maybe come forward and talk with you or someone from the office, give us a phone number.
It's been so long since I've been in the office because of this COVID. 312-534-8267.
One more time.
312-534-8267. Or it might even be easier to just go on the Office of Assistance Ministry website and just click on the link, and it'll send an email to me and have all the information. So
do they go to archchicago.org and then click in from there?
Yeah, just go to Office of Assistance Ministry.
We first go to www.archchicago.org and then go to what Tom talked about.
What might, if someone is listening and ready to do that, what might they expect in terms of that connect?
Oh, sure, I can speak to that personally. When I was reaching out at that time, I wrote a letter to the Archdiocese, and within a week, possibly 10 days, I received an immediate response back from Leah McCluskey, welcoming me, inviting me to share my story, frankly saying it's okay. To go back to your previous question, Mark, yeah, from the survivor's perspective, there is some, anxiety, potential anxiety, thinking, boy, if I come forward to share my story to church or church officials, will they believe me? And I can personally attest to the fact that I was received very well and I was believed. And so I did tell my story to Leah McCluskey, who is the liaison to the Independent Review Board. And within a few weeks after that, you get a response. And within a few weeks after that, I received, frankly, a letter from Leah saying that Cardinal George, that dates me, that how far back I came forward with this, Cardinal George has accepted the review board's determination that a misconduct did occur. And that made me feel good.
Yeah.
I was happy that I was believed by the church. And I would tell any survivor who's listening or any family member who wants to suggest this to the survivor that you will be well received and met with decency and compassion when you come forward and tell your story.
Now, Mike, if you connect that, a very important event is happening. The 9th Annual Mass for Hope and Healing is scheduled for Saturday, October 24th at 10 a.m. I think it's at Holy Family.
Well, this year in particular, because of COVID, it is online.
Okay.
And so it premieres that day. But in all regular years, it has been at Holy Family Church. The first one was led by Cardinal George, and we've had support from Cardinal George and Cardinal Supich for all this time. So 9 years of support from the leadership for this public outreach, acknowledging the healing that is needed for all abuse survivors, no matter who was a perpetrator, and their family members. And that obviously then relates to the healing needed for our church as a whole.
Now, this Healing Garden and the Healing Mass of Healing and Hope, if I'm not mistaken, this was your idea, correct, going back 9 years ago?
No,
with others.
I was part of the team, and I was the chairman of that particular planning committee. And it was with Matt Honeycutt, who was, in Tom's position prior to that, we had presented, frankly, an idea to Cardinal George, how can we, have a public apology, but more than a public apology, a public place of healing and reconciliation. And the Cardinal had embraced this idea, and we put together a committee of 4 clergy abuse survivors, 2 priests. At that time, it was Father Dowling and Father Jerry Bolin, and then staff members from Tom's office, the Office of Assistance Ministry. And within, 2 years of meeting, we've been able to produce a beautiful, beautiful healing garden, which was dedicated in 2011.
So then on October 24th at 10 a.m., how does someone get on to be part of this Mass of Healing and Hope?
I'll defer that to Tom.
Well, I believe right now they're in the midst of, trying to put it all together. So what we ended up doing was we ended up getting some different video pieces from people locally, as well as victim survivors from different parts of the country, and even as far as Australia, people who have connected with our offices and connected to other victim survivors locally, like Mike. And so there will be a link available on the Archdiocese website, and as we get that, it will be promoted more.
The thing is that I think it's very important when you started this, Mike, along with that team. In fact, is there a shift right now, as both of Tom and Mike, that in terms of, we've been talking about this for many years, which is incredibly important, but Mike, I think recently you have changed your focus a bit to talk about, besides a sense of hope and healing, there's another word you've been using, which has been a very good word, but about moving forward. Can you say more about that?
Well, sure. So I believe that with my whole heart and soul. One of the best ways to move forward is abuse survivors sharing their stories and people hearing and believing their stories, but also working side by side with priests like yourself, Father Greg, and Father Larry Dowling, and Father Mike Gabriel, and staff members like Tom and his office to produce a good result, to produce masses and prayer services of hope and healing that, frankly, acknowledge the Catholic identity still of the abuse survivor and acknowledge the Catholic history. There's so much hope and healing we can do together if we can talk about it. And having, one of the ways that Healing Garden Committee was so successful was that there were 4 clergy abuse survivors working side by side with priests and staff.
Mike,
I think that's the model.
Mike, could you, even though we're in COVID, the garden's outside. If someone has an inkling to want to visit the garden and just be there and pray and think about their situation, and get some, energy around this for them, where is it? And what's the address? How do people get there? It's outside, so it's safe.
Yes, it's safe, and it's literally stunningly beautiful right now with the fall colors. It is directly adjacent to Holy Family Church in Chicago on Roosevelt Road, which is kind of on the campus of St. Ignatius College Prep. And as you park right next to Holy Family, you'll walk literally right in front of the Healing Garden of the Archdiocese of Chicago. And yes, all are invited to reflect and to pray and to breathe and to kind of come to reconciliation about the things that do happen to us in our lives. And you're in a safe space, like you said, Mark. And I may be eating lunch there on the bench. Sometimes I go there myself, and it's a beautiful place to go.
On that note, we need to bring this segment to a close. Before we close, Tom, one more time, give us a phone number and a website for people to learn more.
I'm going to give you the correct phone number. What I realized is right before we left for COVID, my phone had been changed. So the correct number is 312-534-3380.
One more time.
312-534-3380.
And the web?
It's Arch Chicago, and then look up Office of Assistance Ministry.
I want to thank you one more time.
Arch Chicago, Office of Assistance Ministry.
I want to thank in a very special way Mike Hoffman, Chairman of the Hope and Healing Committee, and Tom Tharayil is the Director of the Office of Assistance Ministry in the Office of Protection of God's Children and Youth. Mike and Tom, thank you very much for joining us. Mike, give my love to the family. Both of you doing tremendous work in this whole important area. You're listening to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ, 750 AM, 312-255-8408. Father Greg Sakowicz and Mark Tracy will be back in a few minutes. Stay with us, and again, do not touch that dial.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Catholic Charities After Supper Visions program offers guests of our Tuesday night supper the opportunity to learn the art of photography. These talented guests, who are often experiencing homelessness, are offered disposable digital cameras, and they work with volunteer professional photographers to learn the basics of taking photos. Then the artists go out and capture images on film of anything they find to be beautiful or interesting in the world. Their photos are amazing. Visit AfterSupperVisions.com to learn more about the artists and their artwork. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn too. At After Supper Visions, we are developing film, talent, and hope. It has been inspiring to see how individuals, families, and communities have found ways to help one another throughout 2020. At Catholic Charities, we usually have 35 to 40 events a year where we gather and enjoy time together in support of important programs and services, while raising critical funds that allow us to respond to the growing number of people who are in need of the most basic necessities in life. Many of our events are now virtual. If you would like to be a sponsor for one of these events, please call 312-948-6864. That's 312-948-6864. Also, visit us at CatholicCharities.net/events and follow us on social media too. We so look forward to when we can resume our events in person and reconnect with our friends and partners throughout Chicagoland. For now, please consider donating to Catholic Charities so our vital work can continue. Thousands of people in Chicago count on Catholic Charities every day. Please help us help them today. Learn more at CatholicCharities.net.
You're listening to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ 750 AM. Every Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., the Archdiocese of Chicago presents programming about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Thanks for letting us be part of your morning. Now again, Catholic Chicago.
Welcome back to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ, 750 AM, 312-255-8408. Father Greg Sakowicz and Mark Tracy here in Chicago. And the Great Chicago Fire premieres Friday, October 9th, which is tomorrow, at 8 p.m. on WTTW. It's a Chicago Stories original documentary. It takes a look at the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 and explores how Chicagoans faced destruction, rebuilt the city, and prepared for a new, thriving future. Let's listen to a clip from the documentary, which will air tomorrow evening.
But no one felt the devastation of the Great Chicago Fire like Catherine O'Leary. The fire had started in her barn. A successful dairy owner, O'Leary claimed she was asleep when the blaze erupted.
I was in bed, myself and my husband and 5 children when this fire commenced. I guess it was my husband got outside the door and he ran back to the bedroom and said, "Kate, the barn is afire."
Yet even before the ground had cooled, a local newspaper accused O'Leary of an unimaginable crime, that she started the fire that destroyed her city.
A tremendous clip. And with us on the program this morning, Dan Protess, executive producer, WTTW Television. Dan, welcome to the program this morning.
Thanks so much for having me.
I saw the clip that was sent to me by Vince Girasoli, and a couple-minute clip. It is outstanding. In fact, did the fire begin, was it 149 years ago today?
149 years ago. Yes, tonight at about 8:39 p.m., Catherine O'Leary had just stocked her barn on the near west side full of hay, went to bed, and was having trouble sleeping because her neighbors were entertaining some guests from Ireland and playing the fiddle. The fiddle music was keeping her up, and then next thing she knew, her husband was yelling and saying, "Kate, the barn is afire." And that's, of course, just about all we know is that it started in her barn at 8:39 p.m. What we don't know is how it started, but of course the myth for many, many years was that Catherine O'Leary had been out there milking her cow, which of course no one ever does at night, and that the cow kicked over the lantern and that she was responsible for starting the fire. And that myth was persisted, for until 1997, when she was finally officially cleared by the City Council of Chicago. And that's one of the things we really wanted to unpack with this documentary is why is it? Because, in fact, she was cleared in her lifetime. There was an inquest right after the fire that she was interviewed. All these other witnesses were interviewed, and it was made completely clear that she was not responsible for the fire. And yet she was, certainly when I was a kid growing up in the Chicago area, we always heard she was responsible. And the reason why she was blamed for so many years wrongly was really wrapped up in a lot of anti-Irish and anti-Catholic sentiments.
Now, Dan, you're by virtue of the work you do, you're a historian and you're also a storyteller. And what attracted you to this? This is a very focused program to kind of bring some clarity to this story. What attracted you to this?
So I've been producing TV shows for WTTW for 21 years now, and many of those 21 years have been focused on Chicago history. So I know Chicago history pretty well. I'm pretty passionate about it. And yet the Great Chicago Fire is one of those subjects that kind of steered away from, maybe in a way because it seems just a little too obvious. It's actually, when you think of Chicago history, you think of the 1893 World's Fair, and you think of the Great Chicago Fire. It's one of the first maybe two or three things you think of. And yet it seemed like this was maybe the right time to finally tell that story. One, because I was able to team up with this really amazing producer-director, Peter Marks, who really has a knack for recreations and was able to bring a great animator on board. And so, one of the challenges of telling the story of the Great Chicago Fire is there are no pictures of the fire itself. There are images of Chicago before the fire. There are images of the aftermath, but nothing of the actual fire itself. And so you need to somehow figure out a way to bring the fire to life. And we were able to do so with the help of these amazing animations and recreations.
Like you, Dan, I was Chicago born and raised, and going back to grammar school and high school, of course, it was Mrs. O'Leary. And, of course, that has been, changed and dispelled. But the question is, why was there a need to find a scapegoat, which happened to be Mrs. O'Leary, Catholic and Irish? Why the scapegoat to even begin with?
Yeah, and I was going to say that was the other reason why it seemed like this story was absolutely worth telling right now, is because we do have more and more information about Catherine O'Leary, who she was as a human being and how she was blamed, which really just felt so relevant now in an era where there's a lot of open anti-immigrant hatred being disseminated through the media, and it just felt like the way in which Catherine O'Leary was scapegoated felt so relevant to our present moment. When there's something as just cataclysmic as a third of a city burning to the ground, and the reason why the city burned to the ground is really that we as a city were collectively at fault.
Now, how so?
Well, first of all, the city was built almost entirely out of wood, which is not a good idea for obvious reasons. And also there were building codes which should have prevented a lot of the haphazard construction, and the building codes were not enforced. So in a way, these are kind of big picture, abstract causes of a fire, which kind of place the blame in everyone's lap. And, sometimes it's just easier to blame the least among us. And in 1871, the least among us was Catherine O'Leary. She was an Irish Catholic immigrant in a time when there was really a lot of hatred toward not just any immigrants, but especially Irish Catholic immigrants.
It's very interesting in reading all the background material for today's program. Mm-hmm. This may be a far-fetched example, but the whole thing with Catherine O'Leary and setting the fire, and she's getting the blame for it, reminds me in 2003 when the city of Chicago blamed Steve Bartman for the Chicago Cubs not winning the World Series. Because when you think about it, no one talks about Gonzalez at shortstop with an error, the left fielder pointing to Bartman says with his glove and says, "You did it, you stay out of the way." Dusty Baker never went to the mound to calm down Mark Pryor. None of that's talked about. It was all put on like, Steve Bartman, you cost us a World Series, which is baloney. And so I think the same thing, I mean, it's a far-fetched example, but I love sports and I'm always connecting to that. But I think you can make a comparison there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just easier to blame it. It's in a way, actually, now that you kind of frame it in those terms, and I'm also a Cubs fan, it's not as painful. Like, we didn't do this, our team didn't do this, like that guy did it.
Exactly.
And I think maybe there's some solace in having a scapegoat.
Good point.
Dan, as you produced the program and you learned what you learned, what Catholic structures, if any, survived the Chicago fire? Because there was a huge boon in the growth of the church, like in the early 1900s to the 30s and 40s. But from the 1871 until that time, what churches survived? Did any?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Old St. Pat's survived the fire. Actually, really interesting side note. The night before the Great Chicago Fire, there was another fire at a lumber mill just east of Old St. Pat's.
Wow.
Huge fire. And in fact, that was one of the causes of the Great Fire itself, was that the firefighters were exhausted because they'd been up all night fighting this other fire. And it's quite possible that that earlier fire, which was just right next, essentially just east of Old St. Pat's, might have saved it from the Great Chicago Fire because it had cleared that area of all of the lumber that otherwise might have destroyed the church.
You know, I never heard this. I never heard that story before, Dan.
Fascinating.
In fact, I thought you were going to talk about the Great Fire up in Wisconsin
about
that time. Was that Peshtigo?
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, the Peshtigo Fire happened the same night as the Great Chicago Fire, and yet killed in a small town along the Peshtigo River in northeast Wisconsin. That actually killed a lot more people. The Great Chicago Fire killed about 300. I don't know the exact number for the Peshtigo Fire, but it was much more deadly. But then the other Catholic structures that survived are St. Ignatius College Prep and Holy Family Church, both next door to each other, which, as a matter of fact, that was the parish where Catherine O'Leary worshipped. Beautiful
at Holy Family?
At Holy Family, yeah.
Interesting.
And this was, a lot of this, it was saved largely because the prevailing winds, and this was part of the reason, actually what's really very odd is that right now we're having this unseasonably hot and dry first few days of October. This must have been exactly what it was like. The city had gone months without rain. You know, you can feel what it's like outside right now. I think tomorrow it's supposed to be up maybe even close to 80.
That's correct.
And Chicago, usually when it's this hot, it's also humid. But in the fall, it gets dry You can feel it out there now. You can imagine how a fire might spread really quickly. But there were also these really strong prevailing winds out of the southwest. And so Holy Family is northwest of where Catherine O'Leary's barn sits. And so the fire blew, the wind blew the fire northeast rather than northwest, which spared the church. And there's this legend of Father Arnold Damon, the founder of Holy Family, was in Brooklyn, New York, when the fire broke out, and supposedly prayed to Our Lady of Perpetual Help and said that if the church were spared, he would keep 7 lights burning in the church.
And they're still burning.
And they're still burning there today, yeah.
We're going to take a little break. WNDZ, 750 AM on your dial, Catholic Chicago. Phone number is 312-255-8408. When we come back, we'll continue it's really a fascinating discussion. The Great Chicago Fire, which premieres Friday, October 9th, 8 p.m. on WTTW. Dan Protess will be back in a few minutes, and we want to continue this fascinating conversation. Please stay tuned.
Have you checked out Chicago Catholic lately? Either in print or online, Chicago Catholic has informative and stimulating content, including news from the Archdiocese, beautiful photographs, and a thoughtful column by our publisher, Cardinal Blaise Cupich. Editor Joyce DeRiga tells us about our current edition of Chicago Catholic.
We have an overview of Pope Francis's new encyclical on fraternity and social friendship. Cardinal Cupich's column is also dedicated to it. The Archdiocese is urging everyone to get a flu shot this year. We share the details of the campaign, and we have coverage of the recent ordination of permanent deacons.
Subscribe now. Go to chicagocatholic.com or call 312-534-7777. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Chicago Catholic, a fresh approach to Catholic news.
Do you have a gently used laptop or desktop computer that is gathering dust in your home? Consider donating to our Catholic Charities Veterans Computer Project. We will clean out your device, give it new software, and repurpose it for a veteran who is looking for employment. Your gift will make an incredible difference in a veteran's ability to find a job. Catholic Charities provides veteran services throughout Lake and suburban Cook counties, giving participants an array of professional and personal support. Our veterans have served our country, and it is our privilege to serve them. To learn more about Catholic Charities Veterans Services and the Veterans Computer Project, call 847-782-4219. That's 847-782-4219.
You're invited to Keep Hope Alive 2020, the online benefit and celebration of the Archdiocese of Chicago's immigration ministry and their nationwide program, Tharayil Migratoria. Join us virtually on the evening of Thursday, October 29th, for a night filled with music, camaraderie, and inspiring speakers. Cardinal Blaise Cupich and Sister Norma Pimentel of Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley, who was recently recognized as one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people, will be joining us to help keep hope alive. Now, more than ever, the immigrant community, both here in the Archdiocese of Chicago and across the United States, needs the leadership formation and accompaniment that Tharayil Migratoria provides. Registration is free, and sponsorship and advertising opportunities are available. Visit www.keephopealive2020.org for more information and to register. Again, that's www.keephopealive2020.org.
Welcome back to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ 750. Our phone number 312-255-8408. Father Greg Sackwitz and Mark Tracy, and our guest is Dan Protess, who's the executive producer, WTTW. And the Great Chicago Fire premieres tomorrow evening, October 9th at 8 p.m. on WTTW. Let's listen to another short clip.
Catherine and Patrick worshiped nearby at Holy Family Parish with the dynamic Jesuit leader Arnold Damon. He established St. Ignatius College next door and founded the church to serve immigrant families like the O'Learys.
They had their children baptized at the church, and they created a place of great beauty with their nickels and dimes.
And yet, because of their dedication to the church, Irish immigrants were eyed with suspicion by Chicago's Protestant elite.
The Irish were America's first urban ethnic underclass, because the whole idea, and maybe even ideal, of American identity is that anyone can come here and be an American. All you have to do is reject your home country, leave it behind, and then you're one of us. And Catholics were perceived as being unable to do that because of their loyalty to the Pope.
It's interesting clip. I was up at Mundelein Seminary for 15 years, and it's a seminary of 17 buildings, American colonial. Cardinal Mundelein built a seminary campus to reflect the idea that Catholics, immigrant Catholics, can be good Americans. He saw that, and that was 30, 40 years after the Chicago
Sure, because the
fire.
seminary, he built it and started in 1917, and the doors
Right.
opened in 1921.
So we're looking at Irish and Italian immigrants, and it was anti-Catholic sentiment, also an anti-immigrant settlement by the. What have you learned in terms of that arena? Because Irish need not apply here, so that wasn't Catholic, that was secular, but it's interrelated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Bill Savage, the historian we just heard from, and the other historian who was just amazing on this subject is Ellen Scarrett, who's writing a history of Holy Family Parish right now. Yeah, I mean, part of it was ethnic and, remains throughout American history ethnic. Italians didn't come largely until after the fire, but you read all kinds of accounts of their strange foods. Or even, more recently I've interviewed Mexican Americans about Mexican American history, and you hear about how their classmates would say tortillas, ew, what's that? And food and other facets of culture are often a target for hatred. But yeah, certainly, as Bill Savage just said, the idea was you couldn't possibly be loyal to both the Pope and to the United States. And, when you read newspaper accounts, if there's one way you can learn about the anti-Irish Catholic sentiment of the time, it's by reading the Chicago Tribune from the time, which was published by Joseph Medill, who then actually after the fire becomes mayor of Chicago. And the ways in which they describe Irish Catholics are just almost cartoonish. Their strange ways, and lots of cheap shots about alcoholism, and there's no way they can possibly be the good Americans that Protestants can be, because part of the context here is that Chicago was ruled at the time by what was known as the Prairie aristocracy, and these were Protestants largely from the East Coast, from places like New York, who had come to Chicago to make their fortunes. And in fact, Medill himself was of Irish extraction, but Protestant. And in fact, then after the fire, Medill runs for mayor on this, what he calls the Fireproof Party ticket. And one of the first laws that he enacts actually implicitly targets Irish and German. That was Germans were the other large immigrant group in Chicago at the time. Irish and German immigrant populations by prohibiting the construction of wood frame buildings in the city center, which were the kind of building methods that were favored by the Irish and German immigrants.
Now, Dan, in all your research, what were some of the findings that really surprised and shocked you? Because we all think we know stuff about the Chicago Fire of 1871. You've given some tremendous background and things I had never heard of. But in all your findings, what was like, oh my God, I never knew this?
Well, first of all, what I not know. I knew that the Chicago City Council had cleared Catherine O'Leary in 1997. What I didn't know is that she'd been cleared in her lifetime. In 1872, the year after the fire, she'd been cleared. And so this myth persisted despite the fact that she had been officially cleared by the commission that investigated the causes of the fire. It also just kind of clarified for me the timeline and geography of the fire. A lot of people think, fire must have lasted for 5-6 hours. No, it lasted for basically a day and a half. Started the night of October 8th and burned into the morning of October 10th. And to consider the geography of it, if you know the present-day geography of Chicago, it's unbelievable how far it spread.
What were the boundaries, Dan, for this fire?
So Catherine O'Leary's barn was at just north of DeKoven Street, just north of Roosevelt, around Des Plaines. Ironically enough, the Chicago Fire Academy is there now, where would-be Chicago firefighters get their training. And so that, of course, is somewhat contained by the Chicago River, but in fact, the fire jumped the river twice. One jumped the river from west to east, so Catherine O'Leary was what then was known as the West Side. Jumped the fire to the east and spread through what's now downtown Chicago. Then jumped the main branch of the river, jumped the river again to the north side. And then the north side was really the hardest hit by the fire. Obviously, we know it burned the path through where the water tower is because that famously survived the fire, but burned all the way to Fullerton and Clark, which is really far. Yeah, quite a distance.
Because interesting, Holy Name Cathedral, where I rector, it burned down. It was not the cathedral then, but when it burned down in October, then took 4 years and 1 month to rebuild the Holy Name, which then became the cathedral. So you're right. It devastated this area in the heart of downtown. And when you think about it, a day and a half in dry conditions, that fire must have been relentless.
Yeah. And you see the images coming out of California and Oregon now. That's, it kind of gives you a sense of what it must have been like. And there are all these accounts of people who would get, first of all, had no idea the fire was coming their way, just assumed that this was going to be contained to this small area, and so weren't, grabbing their possessions and rushing as far away from the fire as possible. Instead, they were stopping to look at the fire because they were just, it was almost like a form of entertainment.
As it was getting closer. We need to bring this to a close, Dan. I can't believe how fast this half hour went. I want to thank in a very special way Dan Protess, executive producer, WTTW TV. And the Great Chicago Fire premieres tomorrow evening, October 9th at 8 p.m. on WTTW. It is a must-watch for every Chicagoan. Dan, thank you very much. You've been a tremendous guest, and God bless you. I'm a White Sox fan. You're a Cubs fan, but may God bless you anyway.
You're on the right side of the street, Dan.
Because Mark's a big Cub fan. So I want to thank in a special way also Mark Teresi. Great being with you today, Mark, and great job of our producer, Vince Gerasoli, and great work of our engineer, Michael May. To all, may God bless all of you. Stay safe. Also, Brian, hockey hitman Brock is also with us back there. Thank you, Brian. To all, God bless. Go Chicago Bears.
Join us every Monday through Friday at this time for Catholic Chicago. You can stream our programs live or listen to past programs by visiting our website, archchicago.org, and clicking on Radio TV. And please connect with Catholic Chicago on social media.